I'm going to show up on YouTube or Facebook. And some of you I see show up on both, and that's great. I'm not trying to fool you in terms of where I'm going to do these videos. It's more a matter of that Facebook can be kind of finicky when it comes to the live video button. So if I don't feel like messing with it for a long period of time, I just come over to YouTube. I've been getting questions. Here they are. There's one question I want to answer that I don't even know how applicable it will be to many people out there, but I'm going to share it anyway. This is prompted by a question. Scott, I had a non-dual realization, and now I have tremendous lower back pain. Actually, it's always been there. Now it's worse. As you can imagine, I'm super interested in learning even more. I'm learning and using the repression inquiries. Absolutely superb. Nothing else in the world does that deep, but I think he meant goes that deep. Show me how you would rest and regulate between inquiries. Let me translate that for you. He was watching a video where I was doing deep somatic inquiry, which I'm going to do some for you today because that's one of the questions. I'm going to show it to you. But he was watching one of the videos where I explained that for the first 2 years of the serious chronic pain, I had not yet developed the inquiry tools to go into deep repression or anything really. All I had were some older tools left over from the days when before Killaby inquiries. And just so you know, guys, when you're watching these videos, the inquiries that I'm using and talking about are not the living inquiries. That question has come up. They're the Killaby inquiries. Um, we had to make a name change. That's all I have to say. We had to make the name change. It wasn't necessarily what we wanted to do. But when you're referring to any of the work that you see me talking about on YouTube or Facebook Live in the last 4 years, that's the Killaby inquiries. You're going to want to know that because if you get into one of these situations where you're not in there yet, maybe, where you have intense chronic pain or an illness comes and you start becoming interested in emotional repression, for example, or at some point you want to go deeper on in the somatic, the way that I'm doing on here, and you want to actually learn. If you go looking for the living inquiries, you won't find it simply because we've developed all of this in what we call the Killaby inquiries. It's like a different container. And it's, I haven't even been doing the living inquiries or even talking about them since 2016 because of these new developments. So when you go out and share about this work with other people, make sure that you're saying it's KI, Killaby inquiries, not living inquiries. Because if you call it living inquiries, you'll send people on a wild goose chase to a site that is great. It's one of my old sites, but it does not contain anything of what I'm sharing here about this. And so you might get frustrated. Where you want to go to learn more is killaby.com. And then you can fish through the different courses and trainings and sessions and blogs. Okay, got that out of the way. So back to this person's question. He was watching me talk about doing the deep somatic inquiry on specific strands of content suffering, like repression, trauma. But in those videos, every now and then I said that for the first 2 years, before I was able to develop KI, the Killaby inquiries, to really meet the chronic pain more deeply, I was essentially doing some inquiry, but mostly regulating through a number of different resources, regulating my nervous system. And I mentioned in one of those videos that one of the greatest source of regulation was rest or presence. But I didn't explain anything around that, how I use that. And here's the reason I've been reluctant to talk about this is because the way that I was resting at the beginning, I think you can rest with a pain or a contraction in a way that bypasses it. Here's what I mean. I'm going to show you a way to relate to a pain or a contraction. I don't know if you're going to be able to do it. I'm going to show you what I did when I said regulate the pain or the nervous system through presence. I'm going to show it to you. Um, but what I noticed is that during those 2 years before I learned how to go deep into the repression issue and the trauma, I was just regulating day by day, managing, functioning. And the problem with that is I was doing that within and as presence, but I wasn't getting to the root. I wasn't going into the mind body connection at first that was making the pain so bad. So in regulating it through presence, it started to get worse, worse and worse and worse. Had surgery, you would think it would eventually get better. No, for a year or more, it got worse and worse and worse. And here I was just resting in presence, and I'll show you what I was doing. The key takeaway there is in presence. It's not the be all end all of everything. It isn't. Because as you're resting with that, you may actually be ignoring something very specific that needs to be looked at. And frankly, just resting in presence, you might just literally shut that possibility out of your consciousness. And if that needs to be dealt with, whatever that is creating or amping up a pain signal, if you're not looking at it specifically, it's just going to keep getting your attention. And that's what it was doing for me. Resting in presence was how I regulated and just survived each moment. Without that, I don't really don't know. I would probably been more medication. But here's the takeaway. This is one of the things that I'm saying that I think some people find controversial, but I'm just trying to share my experience, which is I'm going to show you how I did that, resting with it. But when you're resting with something that just keeps wanting to get your attention, like it's hurting more, it's creating some sort of real disturbance in your body, turn towards inquiry. There's something there to most of the time, unless it's physical, there is something there that these inquiries can get to. Hopefully, I mean, they have for me and for others. Don't continue just resting in awareness when the pain is amping up like that, because that's why I would go to the emergency room, because eventually the pain won. It got my attention. Now, let me show you, though, how I was managing by resting with it so many days for 2 years. So this is actually very helpful. But parts of this I haven't shared because I don't know how available it is to people. It's very hard to instruct, but it's like this: from awareness, feeling into the pain or being aware of it, but then withdrawing all localized attention. Phew. Now, I think that's something that I'm able to do because of the non dual realization. But I was able to do that. So, resting with a pain or a contraction for me was just to let it be as it is. Of course, just in presence, let it be as it is. That's, I think that's a no-brainer. I'm not going to go over that. That's a lot of what I did is just if I felt it, if it felt like this object, I'm just going to rest and allow, let the mind go quiet. Of course, sometimes it would be very painful though in the end. So again, the pain signal trying to get my attention. Be careful with presence practices if you think that they're going to just somehow take care of something that's festering. That's what I've been trying to say, because eventually I had to go into inquiry or don't know what would have happened. Suicide, major drug addiction, don't know. This is why I'm reluctant. I'm trying to get people to take care of the issues. I'm more encouraging to take care of what it is that happened to you when you were a kid, because what I found is that that's what's relevant. What happened to you is relevant to what you're feeling physically in your body. Resting in presence doesn't get to what happened to you. And what happened to you matters because the body keeps the score. Even in a non dual realization, this is exhibit A, this question right here. This person said that they had a non dual realization, assuming then that it was a shift, like they've shifted into awareness. but now they have an amping up of back pain that was always there. Do you see all the ingredients? So what's happening is that awareness was recognized, so to speak, for this person, and then whatever was able to hide before cannot hide as much, and that's what I think this person is experiencing. So if you just this is what I want to say, if you just rest with it or do these presence practices that I'm about to show you, that could be great, and it can maybe even get to some of the root of it. But remember that unless this is traumatic injury, the past is very much involved in this pain or this contraction that you're experiencing. I don't want to lose sight of that as I explain this. But I'll go back to this. So I got really good at, again, this is for people, and maybe anyone can feel into this and recognize what I'm saying, but this is the most powerful way of being with my pain that didn't include inquiry. A way to regulate it was just that. It's like feeling into it. So feeling into it gently, and then also noticing the space all around it. That's important. And then for me, it was just seeing the localized attention. There's within awareness or within, yes, within that greater space, there's an attention thing. You notice that? So just close your eyes and notice how there's this little attention thing that happens inside awareness, and you can turn that attention, like that narrow attention, on anything. So I can pay narrow attention to this computer. Narrow. This is really important, guys, on this issue. If you want to, you might think, what's he doing? Listen, narrow attention. A thought is narrow attention, often. Thinking is narrow attention, but also witnessing can be narrow attention. Narrow attention, where it's focused on a singular place, is exactly what I noticed chronic pain fixation is all about. So that narrow attention thing tends to get fixated on an area. Follow me? And then you get what we call that chronic pain signal. You've got the pain signal and you've got this attention coming regularly, almost addictively to the area, like fixating. So if you don't catch that, that attention thing is good in inquiry because it allows you to bring specific attention to things. We'll talk about that in a second, but not recognizing this narrow attention thing within awareness um, can be painful. So resting is like open, diffused awareness, is what I mean. Resting is that which doesn't have any boundaries or borders or anything. It's open, diffused, right? That kind of recognition is really good for regulating and managing pain. If you can experience that non-localized, open, diffused awareness, start with your eyes closed. You see, because when attention isn't narrowed down on something in particular, then there's an entire field that's recognized, but no particular thing within that field is being focused on. So there's no pain, or the pain would be greatly reduced in that to just like a minor ache until eventually it amped up because there was something to deal with. And that's the takeaway is that this resting in this non localized way, you have to be very careful with it. It's great, it's super helpful, and it can get you into a bypass also. So just keep it in mind that I'm always about rest or presence and inquiry, right? Because if you leave one out, that's where it gets funky, I found. Or some sort of processing, if not inquiry, processing in a narrow way content based on what happened to you, trauma. You see that? You don't go into trauma with open, diffused, non localized attention because trauma was specific, something very specific that happened to you that meant very specific words and programs, you see? So if you just go and live like this all the time, Non-localized, open, diffused awareness. There's all sorts of things that could get missed because there's no narrow attention or specific attention on anything that's truly involved in the creation or the exacerbation of the pain or the contraction. By the way, everything that I'm saying now, I think applies to body contractions, not just chronic pain. So if you don't have any pain, this is still relevant if a part of your body is very contracted and painful. Same thing. If from awareness, if you can withdraw localized attention, so that, and this is very hard to instruct on, but I think one thing is just to recognize the narrow attention mechanism first. Just as you rest here, just notice how your attention can go to any particular thing, but it's a narrow kind of thing, attention. Because, for example, just go with me. If you imagine a lamp, notice that that's all that you're seeing. It's like a lamp. It's a very narrow way of experiencing. It excludes everything else out so that you can see a lamp thought. But attention in the physical environment is the same. So if you open your eyes and you pay attention to this is, by the way, some of the open focus teachings, they talk about this, like looking at a cup. For example, notice how your attention has to narrow down in, right? So this narrow attention thing is very helpful to us, like to get tasks done, to communicate, to think about a particular issue, or even an inquiry to narrow down an issue. All that's really helpful. But also, this narrow attention mechanism is what gets kicked in an almost fixating way around chronic pain or chronic body contraction. And I know that there are some of you out there shaking your head going, yep, I'm paying attention to my stomach all day long. Or my throat is blocked and it's like I'm just constantly fixated there. Or chest, shoulder, where it gets maybe a pain rather than a contraction. Lower back, face neuralgia, migraine. Follow me? So that narrow attention mechanism, when it becomes addictive like that, is very much a part of that pain signal. So as I was getting that pain signal and I needed to be able to function, you have several choices. It's like take painkiller, take something else, use an external resource of another kind, like I was doing somatic movement, yoga, qigong. Okay, all of those things. But what I learned to do that was most helpful was this: is just to withdraw localized attention. So one thing is spotting this attention mechanism. Spot it first in your experience and notice how it operates. There's a larger boundless, you could say, space or awareness, presence, and that's not it. But within that, there's a movement of attention. See that? And that movement of attention is also, it's a narrow, it's like when thoughts arise, that narrow attention is in that. So recognizing that narrow attention and watching how it moves within awareness or to awareness. So there's specific attention being moved around. See that? And it's not just the eyeballs moving. It's literally your awareness gets narrowed, attention gets narrowed. See that? Now, once you see that, if you can drop back to that non-localized awareness from there. So seeing the mechanism of narrow attention, just seeing that and then just relaxing and resting as the open diffuse awareness that doesn't have any particular location. There's no narrow attention right now as I'm resting. The narrow attention mechanism dissolves in seeing it and moving into that non localized, diffused awareness. So there were many days where just resting in that, I didn't have any pain, or the pain was low. But then as time went on, this is what I want you guys to watch for. It's a great way to be with the pain as a way to manage it or regulate it. But again, if there's something going on that needs more narrow attention, what I'm seeing in people is the presence, the resting in presence, non localized, not only doesn't get to that specific thing, but can be a way of like washing over it. Hear me? Like almost like taking it out of your awareness in a way that bypasses it. That's bad news for people who try to rest everything on non localized, non dual awareness, where they try to say that that's the be all end all. Because I'm living proof that that got me into a bad place. Here's what I'm saying by that, so you don't mishear it. It's super helpful to regulate in that way, non localized. And at the same time, because it's non localized, it misses something that's localized. Pain and contraction is often, not always, localized. So when this pain signal, here's what I learned. The pain signal that wants me to get to pay attention to an area is intelligent. It's actually saying there's something here that you need to pay attention to. Now, what I found out was it's not what I thought, because I thought that I needed to pay attention to it so I could go to the doctor, get surgery or something. Like if it's physical, so the signal is there. And come to find out, that was a dead end road because all roads of the physical didn't lead anywhere other than just some temporary relief. Soon I started to recognize that the pain signal was alerting me to something else, which is something that was unresolved in my body and festering. And that's the unresolved trauma and shame, repressed emotion. You see how awareness can be a bypass? This is, I think, why maybe I get questions like this. And I get them a lot. Still to this day, the non localized presence is very much accessible to me. And I live in that quite often because whatever discomfort may be left from the physical part, like there is a physical element of my spine, which is a little twist or a little pressure, immediately in non localized awareness, that isn't felt. But that's after a lot of inquiry. So let's talk about inquiry now. Well, at the end, I'm going to do an example of some deep somatic inquiry, which is like more localized, narrow attention on things that need attention. But there's a couple of other questions here. I may not answer them if they're not particularly relevant to this. Um, yeah, there's a question I'm going to probably do a different video on, which is repression of positive emotions and things. Stay tuned on Facebook if you're interested in that. That's a thing that can happen, is repressing excitement, repressing enthusiasm, repressing elation, love, joy, happiness. I'll talk about that next. Let me show you an example of the deep somatic work for those who are asking about that. Now, to put all this together, when I wasn't in inquiry, I was resting a lot in non-localized awareness. So I've already explained all that. But at a certain point, I tuned into the fact that the pain signal is really trying to get me to pay attention to something. And when I went into inquiry, I found out what it was. Now you can find out what it is for you through deep somatic inquiry. Just watch me for a second. There isn't much at all going on in the body. So I'm simulating this. No more non-localized attention and inquiry. Become aware of presence, but don't non-localize everything. Come into feeling into the sensation that's in pain. Bring awareness into it. When you're feeling into it, allow your awareness to be somewhat open and diffused so that you can recognize the space around it. But don't sort of withdraw all that localized attention. Just notice some space around it and let it be. Start from a place where you're just letting that be as it is. Now, I know that sometimes it's painful. And when you rest as awareness, what you notice is how painful it is or how contracted. You may want to do some inquiries first on your desire to fix or change that. I had to do that a number of times, frankly, because the mechanism of wanting to fix it created a bit of anxiousness, stress. So, some inquiries you can do is a simple reverse inquiry, feeling into that area. I don't have to do anything with this. Yes, I do. The words start coming, just observing now. Yes, I have to fix it. Letting that be fully in awareness. So here, you're narrowly aware of some words, but you're also aware of the space around them. So you're letting those words be to awareness. They fall away, and I come back to the inquiry. I don't need to do anything with this. Some version of that inquiry. Yes, if I don't, I'll have this forever. You see, there's a little script, is what I'm saying. Staying with that inquiry for a while until when you say, I don't have to do anything with this, you can feel that. You can feel that restfulness with it. Like, okay, this can just be as it is for now, at least for now. Then go start deeper inquiry. If you go into the trauma or emotional repression or something very heavy, and you take that really strong seeking energy with you, it can add stress to the experience for you and can amp up the pain while you're working with it. So, restful awareness is a good place to start. Now that I'm feeling into it, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I would do. I'd feel into it and just say, okay, who or what is this about? And sometimes I would just have all the major important people in front of me before I would do that because I know that my important relationships, that's where this stuff is going to reside. Mom, dad, sister, brother, all the bullies, all the ex boyfriends, ex husbands, close friends, anyone, and then ask who or what is this about. And what's great about consciousness is it literally provides you the answer if you listen and you don't try to think about the answer. So if you ask who or what is this about and you don't go into mind, you rest as awareness to watch mind. Watch for words or pictures, also sensations or feelings, whatever wants to respond. Who or what is this about? And let's say, here comes my bully. For it could have been that person, it could have been someone else, whoever it is for you. Let that person remain there in awareness and let everybody else go away. Now you got the who, you want to know what, right? Looking at my bully, I might start with like feeling into the pain, somewhat narrow attention on the pain. That narrow attention is within the larger awareness. And there's some narrow attention also on bully image. So one of the first things I might say is, what am I believing about this relationship or about him or about me? And a simple one might be, I'm unsafe. Okay, that's just really getting started with it. Okay, so I have this story that I'm unsafe, and that story feels connected to this pain, like it's an old trauma, just as the image of my bully feels relevant. So I'm on a relevant inquiry pathway now. I can just continue looking at my bully and saying, I'm totally safe while feeling into the pain. And if there's trauma connected to that, you may feel a flare up of the pain. As soon as you say, I'm safe, the body that keeps the score, it has its own voice. It's like saying, no, I'm here. This contraction, I'm here, this pain, to let you know that I'm not safe. Let the body do that. But what you want to do is tweak out what the thought is there, because these thoughts are very unconscious at this level. Trauma is repressed. Emotions that are repressed are repressed. What repressed means is that these are not thoughts that are easily and automatically accessible to you. So if you're able to bring them up, don't turn away from them. Think about that. This is the important thing, because so many people are doing inquiry and they're going into the body too quickly when there's a bunch of thoughts up here that say, I'm not safe. It's not safe. The world's not safe. I can't trust people. I've never been able to see that. Whenever you feel into a pain or a somatic area and you reverse something like that and you say, I'm safe, and you're looking at the person at the same time who made you feel unsafe, you're likely to get a string of thoughts that prove that you're not safe. This is what I mean by this unconscious line of thoughts. This unconscious line of thoughts is part of what holds that pain or contraction together. So if you went down into the body, you'd miss all that. Don't miss it. In missing it, I got in worse pain. That's what I've been trying to tell people. One of the worst habits when you have a very deeply, this is very controversial, but just hear me and then go verify it for yourself. So you don't believe me, find out for yourself. One of the worst habits you can have on the spiritual path is coming into a contraction or a physical pain and then just resting with it, remaining blind to the thoughts that keep it there. It's almost a surefire way, or it was in my experience, to keep pain alive and make it even fester and get worse. Not dealing with what's going on, literally trying to bypass it. So here we are in inquiry. I'm safe. No, I'm not. And now I'm observing each thought that says I'm not safe, one at a time, from awareness. Doesn't matter what the content is, rest and allow it. Rest and allow each thought to fall away on its own, by itself, in awareness. Because if a thought falls away, one that was deeply unconscious and connected to the pain or contraction, then in it falling away, the binds that connect that thought, that particular thought, with something in the body can loosen or dissolve. Or, you see what I mean? Like, it literally makes a shift, even an incremental shift in the somatic, by really staying with each one of these unconscious thoughts until they fall away, and then reprompting the inquiry. So let's say I observe several things come up and then it gets quiet. That quietness is deceptive, guys, because this is unconscious stuff, repressed. So what I think a lot of people have done is they've seen a little bit of it and then it goes quiet. Wouldn't repression do that, by the way? It would just go like where you can't see it anymore. And then you get fooled into thinking, oh, just presence. Again, there is presence there, but you're still believing something, most likely. And the only way to really know is to bring the bully back up, or the person, and go through it again. Like, I'm safe. Here it comes. No, I'm not. Remember, this is a lifelong belief system or habit. So a few layers of that, there's going to be more than that. So you just stay with that, because that's an important thing to stay with, and even coming back to it, like on different days with inquiry, because the feeling of being unsafe that connected to, in my experience, the bully, manifested as this in my body. For you, it'll be something else. It'll be someone or something out there that, for which you have some story around, that's unconscious, and it's creating or maintaining a contraction. Now, frankly, you would think, wow, that goes pretty deep. Yes, it does, but you can go much deeper than that. Stay with these kinds of stories that come up like this, reverse them, but you can go deeper. Before I go deeper, let me show you something. When you're inquiring into something like this, like, I'm completely safe while looking at my bully, Because this stuff is very Velcro to the body, there are going to be either pictures or words that are really sticky. They have to be sticky. Remember this. There is no way you could have survived, at least the mind says, without it being sticky. You had to believe that you were unsafe in order to apparently survive through something. So when you start seeing sticky words and pictures, instead of being surprised, say, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." And have that attitude. Like, of course it's going to be sticky. This is an old story, very scary. I didn't want to look at. So it's just been festering all my life, not being seen, and then manifesting physiologically in my body. Of course it's going to be sticky. When it's sticky, for example, when you get a image that's sticky, so let's say I say, I'm safe, and then here comes the face of the bully again on another day. Here's an image. These images are tricky because you can get stuck right there. And I know you know the experience of that. It's like, I just can't get beyond this image. The reason you can't get beyond it is not just because it's stuck to some sensation, seemingly. It's because there's still unconscious words connected to it. That image is important to you only because of what you believe about it. So as you see the image, just say, okay, so what does it mean about me? Then some more words come out, observing those fully until they fall away. And then if the image remains sticky, mining out more words. What else does the image mean? Ah, these new words come out. By mining out those words, you take the strength from the memory. Remember, because the memory has strength because words are unconsciously connected to it. That allows you to move on in your inquiry. But when words are sticky, by the way, you can always tap. Like, if for whatever reason some of these skills don't work and you get stuck on something, just begin tapping, but not turning away attention completely away from the image. Instead, just briefly seeing it from awareness and shifting focus to the tapping sound and sensation and resting there. And then coming briefly back to it after resting with the tapping for a good bit and seeing it again briefly. This is like a little trick to move you through that, but it's not a favored trick because there's information and insight to be gathered from this memory if you can. It's to see the unconscious words. It's to become to wake up to that. So the more preferred way would be to mine out words from the picture. But if you don't have that skill yet, tapping can move you through it. Sometimes words become sticky, and just remember that they're supposed to be sticky because whatever words you're looking at must have been really important to your survival in your life in your past. Something that's really connected to survival is not going to feel like light and airy, like an image of Mickey Mouse. It wouldn't have worked to keep you safe, or it wouldn't have you wouldn't have been able to survive apparently if it was just something very light. No, the fact that it's sticky words is exactly how it should be. That means you're in the right place if it's sticky. But when words are sticky, we can get stuck there, just identified with them. Again, you can use the tapping to move through, but the more preferred way is utility inquiry. What do I get out of believing these words? So let's say the words are, I'll never trust people. And let's say those words came up as a result of doing this I'm safe inquiry. I never trust people. Those words are sticky. What do I get out of believing I'll never trust people? This is how I protect myself. Now I can witness that. Let that be fully and rest and see if there's anything else. Again, these thoughts, this is not arising for me. So you may have to really be with this stuff a little longer. But you can keep asking the utility question, what do I get still out of believing that? And keep witnessing. That can move you beyond the stuck words. See that? Now, believe it or not, that that can feel very core, but I found there's stuff underneath that. This is interesting. I think people think that trauma is the be all end all of everything, and to me, it's just one piece of it because trauma often results in emotional repression, right? Repression of anger, repression of fear. So, in these moments where we're traumatized as kids and it doesn't feel safe um, to be ourselves or even to show up, think about what we have to repress in order to show up and survive in that situation. And we don't even know it. That's the thing, because it's repression really hides from us. I feel it hides from us much more than trauma, and trauma hides from us. And the two are connected. So at some point, you want to work through these stories that come up just from those initial inquiries. For sure, stay with them. I'm safe, or reversing whatever it is that came up. But then you want to be a little bit more um, skillful to conjure up some of the deeper layers of this that keep the pain or the contraction in place. And I've said this before, you might want to do a litmus test around repression because I'm finding that repression is really the culprit when it comes to these things. Trauma too, but a lot of repression in people who have chronic pain or body contraction. How do you get to repression? Start with a litmus test. So resting is awareness. Feel into the vulnerable area. For some people, it'll be chronic pain, like a shoulder. Feel into that. Open, diffused awareness, but feeling into it as a specific form. Not trying to go into non localized awareness just to erase that out. More narrow focus on the sensation itself or in the sensation, and then resting with it. Here's your litmus test. Pull up the important people in your life, definitely mom and dad, any early caregivers, step parents, teachers, whoever, and maybe some relevant people, recent relationships. And as you're looking at all of them and feeling into that vulnerable area, say, I can feel and express anger directly to all of them or to any of them. Listen to your body. Listen from awareness to how your body responds to it. If there's a repression, you may feel the body like doing something in response to that question. It's like it wants to say something, but maybe you don't know what it wants to say. Be more interested in what the thought is around that inquiry. If there's a repression in the body, obviously the body is going to respond. Don't get so enamored with that. It's going to respond. We need to go deeper and find out what it's doing. Why is it responding like that? So if you get a body response into as a result of the question or the inquiry, I can feel and express anger directly to them. Ask, what does this body sensation want to say right now? In response to this inquiry. Find out what the thought is that responds. So I want to feel and express anger directly to them. Now I'm awake to the thought field. No, no. Find the no. Because if there's a repression there, there should be a strong no or some version of a no. I don't want to feel and express this. That's that old sort of child voice, repressed voice. The mechanism is being seen and heard now. Now you've tapped into what I call the repression barrier, but forget that. All that it is a long line of thoughts that are going to follow that are going to tell you in one way or another, no, you cannot feel and express anger. And those thoughts are what's holding that, partly what's holding that contraction or that pain there. When I talk about deep, skillful somatic inquiry, here's a big piece of it. I've been meeting with people for the last year who have been making the error of when they feel something strong in their body, it's actually a trauma response or something very deep and repressed, but they come down and feel it directly, as if that's going to produce something. But many of these folks, in coming down to feel it, have encountered a contraction that is very stubborn, or a pain that is very stubborn, that doesn't actually dissolve. Not that that's the goal of it, but if it's not real, if the identification in that is not real, then it's going to dissolve. Like it's unstable form there. I don't know if you're following me. They're making the error of, as soon as they contact something around trauma or some memory or some sticky words, instead of staying with them, they go right down. And then as soon as you go down, feeling into it, knowing that there's all these unconscious thoughts up there, you're reinforcing unconsciousness. Hear me? I see it time and time again. Meeting with people and showing them a different way, they're just so grateful. Sometimes tears, sometimes laughter when they recognize what they're doing. Stay with the unconscious thoughts that come up as a result of these inquiries. When you contact that thought that says, no, I don't want to express anger directly, make a footnote of that, write it down. Anger repression is an entire line of inquiry that needs to be done because somewhere along the way you began repressing anger unconsciously and it's now festering in the body and held somewhere. If you don't make contact and make that story conscious, it's going to continue repressing anger, which for me was more pain. Now you can do a litmus test on other repressions. So keeping all those people up there, you can say, I can feel and express fear to all of them. There's an intelligence here that knows what you're asking. It's very specific. It's saying, I want to, while you're feeling into the vulnerable area, I want to feel and express fear. No, I couldn't. Dad would have hit me. Okay, that's a version of no. Make a note. Fear repression is part of your somatic congestion. Write it down. I had to find all these on my own, and it was clunky, but now I have them for you, and you can just use them. Love repression. Bring up those people. I can feel and express love openly to all of them. No. Or maybe you'll get a yes. If you get a yes, don't write it down. So that's my thing. Don't write it down. If you get a no, write it down. Repressing love is how we survive sometimes when we're kids. Because in our culture, sometimes love equals weakness in some families, for example, or it feels that way. Do a litmus test on joy or happiness or that flavor of emotion. I can feel and express joy and happiness in this family or to these people. No. Huh. If you get a yes, it doesn't go on your list. If you get a no, write down repression of joy or happiness. Go through guilt. I can feel while feeling into the vulnerable area and looking at these folks, I can feel and express guilt. Write it down if it's relevant. I can feel and express shame. Write it down if it's relevant. It even goes deeper than that, um, in the sense that there's some other areas that you might want to pay attention to that I found, and they may be something that's germane to my sexual orientation, growing up gay, but just in case it's relevant to you, is there may be the way that it feels for me is that the masculine and the feminine are equally available to me, but it wasn't always that way. During the repression, I had to come to terms with the fact that the feminine in me was repressed in order to survive. Remember, growing up gay, anything that looked feminine, my artistic talent, anything, my love of dance, any of that, I had to repress that, hold that back because that was part of why I was being bullied. See that? So, expression of the feminine. So, if you're someone who has has in some way pushed that down, it could be either gender pushing down some natural expression of a gender that can definitely. There's a study on this, guys. They actually studied folks who were transitioning from gender to gender and gay men and women, that if they suppressed some of these things, they had chronic pain, higher incidence. Not surprising to me at all. So just look into that. Like so the way that I did that, if that's relevant for you, is I can feel and express my feminine nature. No. You see, these are deep repressions. And before asking that particular question, I couldn't access it. So going about my whole life not knowing that I'm repressing this part of myself until I ask that question. Write it down. Gender or yeah, gender repression, sexual repression. It is relevant to body contractions. Ask Dan McClintock, my co-developer of this work. He found out, and he shares about it publicly, that repression of sexuality can fester as part of a stomach contraction that then can come out in sex addiction or porn addiction or something, repressing it. And we do this in spirituality sometimes because we vilify sexuality, saying sexuality is the world of form or it's desire and it's bad. That's a very high insight that someone may have spoken, but here's the thing. If that's their actual experience, that they don't have any sexual desire, that's fine. But if you have sexual desire and you're repressing it, before you get to this high insight around sex being desire or something and letting go of that, get to that repression, because the repression can fester in the body. So you can say, I can feel and express my sexuality freely, or I can have sex without any problem, without any hang up. However, you want to do is evoke that and see if there's a no. Hmm, write it down. That's relevant. And then repression, for example, of just self. So we say in non-duality there is no self. But if aspects of self, illusory as it may be, are being repressed in the recognition of that no selfness, guess what? The self repression will fester. One of the greatest inquiries for that is just to find out whether there's a repression of self, is I can fully be myself everywhere, all the time. No. Okay, now you have it. Now you have your repression list that you're going to be busy for a while. And let me tell you that this is the most important work that I think I've ever done, frankly. Besides the work that seemed to help with the non-dual realization, nothing came close to this repression work in terms of transformation. Because I literally got out of pain, and then the repression work itself opened something up in me that is very hard to put into words. And I'm seeing it with everyone else. But these repressions are long standing, they are deeply held in the body. Don't expect that when you go into them and just look at a few no's, that you're going to be clear of that. What I found is that repetition is so key. And I've just tried to explain this to folks so you can get it up here in the mind first, even before you go into inquiry. There is no way that a lifelong story of repression is going to be made of just a few thoughts. Because every day of your life, unconsciously, you're doing it. It's a lifelong habit. In order for a lifelong habit of that strength to maintain itself, it has to have a very strong story connected to it, mind, largely unconscious until you pull it up. Here's how you would go into each one, starting with anger, pulling up the person, like a father, a bully, someone where the system learned to repress anger. See the person, feel into the vulnerable area. I can feel and express anger. And now, instead of a litmus test, you're witnessing the versions of no. At this level, be with each thought, if you can, one thought at a time. Sometimes we get flooded, rest with that, or tap if you get flooded. But if you can slow the thoughts down, so the first no that comes up, no, if I expressed anger, he would attack me. Stop there. Don't add a story to that that makes it feel even more true. Just be with that thought from awareness and letting it be for as long as it wants to. Remember that if any words or an image gets sticky, I've already explained that earlier in the video, how to work through that. Continue witnessing and redoing this inquiry. Like, I can feel and express anger. No, here's another version for whatever other reason. Stay with it. Keep witnessing like that, excuse me, and come back to it every day for a while. Come back to the whole set of repression inquiries. Run through them because chances are they're all playing a part in the unconscious somatic thing that you're dealing with, pain or contraction. You should feel as you begin moving through these at least some incremental changes without even going in to the body when something gets conjured up. Just being with the thoughts that say no, some version of no, you should start to feel incremental changes in the area that it's connected to. And sometimes they can be small changes, but you can see those changes happening just by witnessing the thoughts. Don't go jumping down into the sensation yet, because the sensation holds information that says you're not going to feel the emotion in here. The sensation has that content, that program with it. So when you come down and feel it, the system has already decided you're not going to feel that. And now you've left the thought stream that tells you you're not going to. You've literally become unconscious to it the moment you come down here. Stay with the nose. Each day, stay with them. Because you're dealing with anger repression, it's likely if you're doing skillful inquiry that at some point, not necessarily during inquiry, anger is going to come up. And you could be driving down the road with your spouse and all of a sudden you're just pissed. And if you don't understand what's happening, it can be confusing. What's happening is that you've been doing repression inquiries that provide a space for anger to come up now. Learn inquiry on the stories that come up with it, like trying to control other people or people needing to be different. Because if you don't see those stories, the anger will just fester even more. But now it's up. It's not pain. It's not contraction. It's anger. You can still feel stuck if you're running stories. It's great that you got the anger up. Now rest and let it be and see the stories that attend to it. The same is true for fear or joy or love repression. You should start to see changes in that. Like, it's easier to open up to someone to show love, or with fear, fear starts coming up. Learn how to inquire into that when that comes up. That's not repression inquiry, it's up already. Look into the stories that attend the fear as it comes up, because it's not about just bringing it up and then identifying with it. It's seeing through that too. I'm just trying to warn you that if you're not aware of what's going on, you'll be shocked at how you're responding to someone. I've seen this many times. Although I'm explaining this in this video, I highly recommend you work with me or another facilitator on this, because the facilitators in my camp that work on this, they are folks who have already gone through this or they're deep in this work. So they know how to navigate through a lot of different things, and they can hold the space for you where it feels safe and even loving to go into this. And until you get a better sense of the skills that I'm talking about, you may not want to go down this road, guys. I'm telling you. The reason that I'm doing this is because I know that you guys are already working on this, some of you, so I'm trying to help you. But a lot of stuff can come up here. Dead serious, like traumas can resurface. Be very careful. doing this work on your own, do it with someone from our camp for a while first so that we can show you all the ins and outs. Your particular content that makes you suffer may require someone to get in there and help with that. Something that I can't do on a video, like something very specific, like sexual abuse or whatever. So I'm just giving you, and then here's another area, trauma response. I think Besser van der Kolk is his name. Yes. He said trauma doesn't arise as a memory, it arises as a reaction. Let's think about this for a second. He's partly correct until you become conscious of the memories. And then you see that it also arises as a memory and even as words. But the words in the memory are often, unless it's pre-verbal, so pre-verbal trauma that happened before we developed language, we may not have very strong words and pictures. But anything that happened after the development of language, we tend to have somewhere unconsciously stored the words and the pictures that are directly relevant to that. So, for example, when Bessel is saying trauma is a reaction, not a memory, he's trying to point to the fact that your body just responds in a traumatic experience. Like, let's say you were threatened by dad when you were a kid and you saw dad as a bully. Then, when you see another bully in life, because this is my trauma, the body is responding. See me, watch me. Like, it's a reaction, almost physical. And so, being able to stop, first of all, regulate your nervous system if need be first, but then to go into inquiry to see more specifically what's happening there, getting quiet, trusting your body. These trauma responses, the reaction is often somatic. So you may feel an emotion like fear, but if you tune into the inner body, you'll find that there's something deeper in there, like again, a contraction or an area of congestion or pain that seems like it's the culprit because it is. So what happened is that this energy um, contains emotion and thought that wasn't processed at the time of the trauma. Now, part of what is it's not just emotional repression that isn't processed. There's a response that wasn't fully processed at the time that it happened. When we were kids, we weren't conscious of what was actually there. As we go back into inquiry and trust the body and feel into these areas that are vulnerable, we start to see some of the words and pictures that are relevant. So, when dealing with a traumatic event, there might be one particular or two images or something that are really persistent. This is important. It's like when you're feeling re traumatized or triggered around something like that, again, your body might feel it, but you may not see until you slow down and get quiet that this current trigger is bringing up something from the past, like a memory. So when Bessel van der Kolk says trauma doesn't arise as a reaction, it arises as a memory, that isn't actually fully true. It is when you're not conscious. You may not be conscious of the words and the pictures, but doesn't mean they're not there because the Velcro effect attends everything. So wherever you're feeling a somatic response, guarantee that there are words and pictures connected to that. If it was after the development of language, and sometimes even before that, we have then, once we learn language, we place it on the pre-verbal trauma. We place meaning on it. So most of the time, trauma, although it comes up as a reaction at first, it's actually, when you look at it more closely, there are words and pictures there. Find one image that seems relevant to this area of the body that's responding in a trauma response. One memory. I was sharing about this the other day. For me, one of the memories was after creating an art project in school. This is funny. And they made fun of me for this. There's this box that we had to paint, and I painted the top of it and it started to drip onto the sides. And so I allowed the drip to just go all the way around it so it looked like a painting that just had drips on each side. It was my very avant garde sixth grade art piece, happy accident, as Bob Ross would say. The bullies went to town on that, and they started just ridiculing me, calling that the drip mobile, laughing, pushing me, shoving me, scaring the shit out of me. So I went into the school library, 4th grade, and that was a monumental moment of just being in the library hiding. And so that moment, there was a snapshot taken of that because I couldn't process those emotions, those thoughts. It's too scary. Just hiding. That snapshot then would reappear in awareness when I was tuned in. I could see, why does this keep coming back? I need to look at this. So pulling that memory up, there I am in the library. I just started to ask, what does this child want to say? What is this main thing that he wants to say but he can't say? Or what exactly does this image mean? And if you ask those questions, you might get something like a command, a trauma command. Um, these aren't really deficiency stories, and they're not necessarily emotional repression. They're like commands that were very relevant at the time of the trauma, but you couldn't speak them. Like for me, it was like, get away, get away, get away, things like that, or stop, get off me, don't do this anymore, I can't. Those kinds of very childlike responses sometimes attend these images. So for me, it was get away and other things. Once I saw that as a trauma response, a command that I could not utter at that time, I recognized why it was so strong because it had never been acknowledged that that was the command, but I couldn't speak it. So instead of just seeing it once and then just letting it fall away, when it came up, I could feel that get away was really tied to the pain. And for you, it might be tied to an area of the body, almost like the trauma response or the command is the sensation. It's like they're synonymous, really Velcroed. So I kept bringing that back up, get away. And as soon as I'd bring it back up, I would just rest with it, open awareness, letting it be until it fell away. And then I would bring it right back up near the sensation that felt synonymous with it and witness it again. So I'm making something conscious that I didn't make conscious in 4th grade. And in order to do that, I have to really bring it up like willingly because the mechanism is don't do that. Don't do that. I'm protecting you. Don't do that. But to the extent that it protected me in 4th grade, it is not protecting me now. It's creating suffering. Bring it back up. Get away. Get away. And I could feel the relief in the somatic experience with each time that I brought it up. And this inquiry had to be repeated with regard to any of the trauma commands that were remaining unconscious. So there's another category, trauma commands. That's what I call them. Ne'er again will anyone say that I haven't demonstrated the deep somatic work. So I'm just, if anybody asks me this question, I'm going to refer back to this video. If you want to know how to do the deep somatic work, save this video and just keep coming back to it. I recommend you work with someone first. And I'd hate for you to get in a situation where you're overwhelmed and wish then that you would work with someone. And guess what? The overwhelm can happen if the skill isn't there. Be careful.